Hello and welcome to Automoblog here in Detroit, Michigan. My name is Carl Anthony. Well, what's the deal with electrified trucks? We've seen the Cybertruck, we've seen the Lightning, we've seen the return of the Hummer, but what can we expect as the years go forward? Well, we've got an expert with us today to help answer that very question. And for more videos like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Our said expert is Richard Reina. Now, he's the product training director at CarID.com, a leading digital aftermarket retailer of vehicle parts and accessories. He's spent his entire career in the automotive industry. You may recognize his name. He's a frequent contributor to Automoblog. He is our resident expert on the classic and collector car market. He also wrote a book, an ebook as well. I'll leave a link below to that. An ebook about how to get into the collector car hobby on a budget. Now, Richard has owned countless collectible cars over the years and currently owns a 1967 Alfa Romeo and a 1993 Mazda Miata. Here to talk about EV trucks. Richard, welcome to Automoblog.
Carl, thank you so much for that, and it's a pleasure to be on this show with you.
So, Richard, give us your perspective here. A high-level view of EV trucks. What is your perspective on the market when we talk about electrification in trucks?
Well, I'll start, Carl. It's a great question to open with, and I'll start with a quick story.
Sure.
At the New York Auto Show, it was April of 2019, was not looking for any particular vehicles, but came across this new vehicle I don't think I had heard of up to that point called the Rivian R1T. So my first exposure to an electric pickup truck was way back over 3 years ago, again at the New York Auto Show. And it got me thinking about electric vehicles in general, which I had been following as an industry observer anyway, but also thinking about pickup trucks. And as your audience may know, pickup trucks represent a huge volume for all automakers. In calendar year 2021 alone, Americans purchased 2.8 million pickup trucks. And 2 million of those, or close to 3/4 of those, were sales of the full-size pickup trucks from the domestic big three, GM, Ford, and Stellantis, which of course makes the Ram. But again, it got me thinking. We knew in 2019, Tesla was still, they were still an upstart, if you will. We were still watching them grow. They were doing well, but they're not where they are. Back then, they were not where they are today. And if you wanted an electric car, you were looking at small, quirky yet expensive things like the BMW i4, or maybe the Nissan Leaf, or the Chevy Bolt, which had been out for a couple of years.
Right.
It was Rivian, a brand that nobody had ever heard of, daring to put out this vehicle that was really ground that was owned by the domestic big three. One question I asked myself was, why have GM, Ford, and at that time it was Fiat Chrysler, why have they not produced an electric pickup truck? And my guess on that is that maybe they were afraid of messing around with the goose laying the golden egg, given how important that whole market was to them.
Sure.
Shortly after I saw the Rivian, I read that both Ford and Amazon had invested hundreds of $millions in Rivian. So I was betting on the fact that they were going to be a success with this truck. 6 months later, the Cybertruck was revealed, and I don't need to talk a lot about that other than to acknowledge that it's a controversial vehicle, love it or hate it.
Right.
But it's not out yet. And then it wasn't until really last year, early 2021, that we saw the Hummer EV, and then finally Ford talk about the Ford F-150 Lightning. So it took some while for this momentum to push forward, if you will, but now it's exploded, Carl. We've got the Rivian on sale, we've got the GMC Hummer EV on sale, the Lightning's in production, and the Silverado's not far behind. So it's happening. It's going to be very exciting to see how the public is going to embrace these forthcoming EV pickup trucks.
Right. Now, Richard, let me pick your brain on something here, being the pricing of these trucks. I think there's a natural tendency for consumers to say, That's cool that it's electrified. It, might have more torque, it might have good range, but it might be expensive. And I think when you look at, say, like the Rivian, you look at something like the GMC Hummer. I have not heard any MSRP figures on a Tesla Cybertruck, but I would imagine that it's expensive. Richard, what insight do you have as far as pricing for these trucks go? What's your thoughts on that?
That again, let's take a step back and look at the EV market in general first.
Sure.
There's a concept out there about parity, and it's been acknowledged for a number of months or years now that electric vehicles in general, when you look at them based on size and equipment, they are, as a segment, they're more expensive than their gasoline engine counterparts. So industry leaders have acknowledged that they need to bring the pricing down on EVs in general to what they call price parity in order for the public to embrace them a little bit more. This is a great question about pickup trucks because we've got the Hummer EV, the Edition 1, starting at around $112,000.
Sure.
The Rivian is not an inexpensive vehicle. Initial pricing, I think, is $69,000 for the base truck, but again, there's an initial or a launch edition that's around $75,000. So on one hand, they are expensive vehicles. On the other hand, when you look at where pickup trucks are in general in the market, again, quick story. In preparation for talking to you, I went online yesterday to the Ford website, and I decided to do a build-in price on a Ford F-150.
Sure.
I picked a King Ranch, starts at $59,000. It's a four-door crew cab, and it comes with a lot of standard features. But I added some popular options to it, a towing package and this and that. It was not difficult picking some popular options and then adding in tax and destination to end up with an $80,000 Ford F-150 King Ranch.
Right.
So I agree that we've got to look at parity with these EV pickup trucks. And the Hummer EV is really, again, that first edition is priced quite a bit up there. And maybe the Rivian is too. On the other hand, we know for a fact that there are some high-end pickup trucks. I was at the New York Auto Show last month, and the Ram TRX had an MSRP label on it for $93,000.
Right. And that's a gasoline variant. That's a Hemi.
That's a gasoline variant.
Right.
So pricing is going to continue to be a barrier to entrance with the EV pickup trucks. We'll talk more about Ford, I think, in a few minutes. But Ford is smartly, I think, pricing their initial F-150 Lightning starting at $39,000, acknowledging that there are going to be higher priced models, but giving customers, at least right now, it seems a choice across that price spectrum.
Right. So, Richard, let me go now to Ford, because you're right. And I do want to get your perspective on this, especially me being a former Ford employee, working as a Ford salesman, selling the F-150 and being around when the EcoBoost engine came out in 2011. And so at the time, and Ford still does this in their marketing, they did the torture testing. And in 2011, when the EcoBoost engine came out, they are running against a Silverado, they're running against a Ram, they're going up Davis Dam and towing, they're going around Miami Homestead. They are just pounding this new EcoBoost engine because at the time it was, well, trucks have to have a V8. They got to have a 5-liter or 6-liter V8. Here's this small 3.5-liter twin turbo. This is kind of out of the ordinary. So Ford went to great lengths with their torture testing to show that it was durable, that it was reliable. But Ford is very aggressive in how they go after GM and Ram. So let's just turn the tables slightly. Let's go to the Lightning. Do you anticipate that Ford is going to aggressively go after the Lightning like they would Ram and Silverado? And then further to that, Richard, how do you think Ford stacks up in the EV truck sector when you have the Silverado EV, which is right there on its heels?
You talk about comparing the F-150 Lightning to the Tesla Cybertruck. I would phrase it this way. Tesla is going to be building the Cybertruck, and I think of the Cybertruck as an EV that happens to be a pickup, whereas the Ford F-150 Lightning is a pickup that happens to be an EV. They sound like really two different ways of saying the same thing, but they're really not. So let me say this to take that the next step.
Mm-hmm.
We're still a year away from the Cybertruck being manufactured and going on sale. I will not be surprised if many of the initial sales of the Cybertruck go to people who have never owned a pickup truck.
Really? Okay.
I'm going out on a limb a little bit here, predicting.
Sure.
So you're going to have the Teslarati, as they're called, who are going to find that truck to be just a fascinating thing. And it is, on a lot of levels, it's a fascinating vehicle. But if it were not for the Cybertruck, they probably wouldn't consider a pickup.
Right.
And they're going to be drawn to that for various reasons. Whereas let's look for a moment at what Ford has done with the F-150 Lightning. I read, and I find this fascinating that Ford did this. They surveyed existing F-150 owners when doing their preparation for the Lightning. And one thing the existing owners said to Ford was a 4-word phrase: don't make it weird. So from 20 paces, you can't tell an F-150 Lightning from a regular F-150.
That is true.
Ford has really taken a very conservative, small c conservative approach with the vehicle that way. But they're trying to appeal to their existing customer base. And at the same time, and this is going to be, again, I'm going to stretch out here a little bit and make a prediction. Ford is trying to appeal to otherwise loyal pickup truck owners currently driving a GM or a Ram product to see if they can convert them over to Ford. From my experience talking to pickup truck owners, they are an incredibly loyal bunch, and it's very difficult to get them to change brands. But if the interest is there in the EV, I think Ford has a shot at gaining some current GM and Ram drivers over into their side.
You know, Richard, that's a good point. Alex Hartman and I, our creative director for Automoblog, we were at Motor Bella back in September of 2021 here at the M1 Concourse. Of course, Ford had a display set up. And you're right, from 20 paces, the F-150 Lightning looks just like an F-150 XLT or FX4, or looks just like any other model. So I do think that's a selling point for them. 100% right on pickup truck buyers being loyal. So Richard, let me get your perspective. So for the working crowd out there who's using their trucks for farming, for agriculture, contractors, even for recreation, towing campers, towing boats, and things like that, is there going to be a barrier getting that crowd switching from, say, a 6-liter type engine, or even an EcoBoost now in Ford's case, or a diesel engine if they're towing heavier? So you have like the Duramax and the Cummins and the Power Stroke. Is it going to be difficult for truck buyers who are really beating the tar out of their trucks? Is it going to be hard for them to switch from the gasoline and the diesel engines to the EVs? What's your thoughts there?
I think that is the single biggest question for the entire market as we go forward.
Mm-hmm.
Talked again a moment ago about Ford, because one downside potentially with the Lightning is if Ford discovers that all they're doing is cannibalizing their own existing sales, and it's really not the success that Ford hopes it's going to be. Because in other words, Ford's not moving the needle. If they're selling 750,000 F-150s and that overall number doesn't change, what are they gaining? So the bigger question, I agree with you, is how are the blue collar professionals who depend on that pickup truck that they're using today for work, how are they going to embrace this truck, and what are the barriers to entrance, if you will? One big barrier, again, is that as a lot, they are an extremely conservative lot. Again, small c conservative, in my opinion. I've talked to them. I've had plumbers and carpenters at my house, and I'll walk outside, and because I'm a car guy, I'll look at what's in my driveway and say, oh, neat Ram you've got out there. What do you think of that? Oh, that's my third Ram 1500 and I love it and it does this and it does that and I got the diesel and I can tow with it and I do snow plowing on the side in the winter. I live in New Jersey because we've got to plow snow here still. So yeah, so are these professionals going to be gun shy about such an unknown? Yeah, the truck looks the same. Because I do think the initial reaction before they investigate it is going to be one of, let me stay away, let me not take that first step, let me see how it goes.
Yes.
See if a neighbor buys it, who's not a contractor. And I'll talk to him 3 months down the road. Hey, did your electric bill go up? Or are you saving money on fuel? But I do think some of the things that Ford has built into the F-150 Lightning, that including, this knocks me out, up to 12 120 volt and 240 volt outlets in the truck.
Right.
Incredible. Standard four-wheel drive with instant torque. They've got a front motor and a rear motor. And until you've driven an EV, you really can't believe that torque. I've driven a number of cars, not the trucks, but with that instant torque you get from the electric motor.
Right.
The towing capacity is there, Carl, it really is. An unknown question is, will you be able to install a gooseneck or fifth wheel connection in these trucks? I can't see that happening in the Cybertruck, at least not yet.
Right.
I'm really not certain about snowplow attachment, but I think these are things that are solvable down the road. So I'm predicting that it's going to take some time, but for the landscapers and the electricians that I've spoken to, again, back to my statement that the Lightning is a pickup truck that happens to be an EV. You've got this 14 cubic foot frunk in the front. And I read the other day that there's charging outlets there. So if you've got something that needs to be charged that fits in that frunk, you can put it in there, plug it in, and while you're driving, your truck is charging this thing. And maybe the most killer feature of all to me, maybe it doesn't affect the contractors so much, but if you lose power at your home, the F-150 Lightning can temporarily power your entire house in place of a gas-powered generator. But with 200,000 pre-orders and with Ford having closed the ordering books on F-150 Lightning until the 2023 models available, which is not going to be until, that ordering book will not open until this summer, I think the trucks will get out there and word of mouth, as well as these very positive initial reviews that I've been reading, start to spread. And I think we'll start to see blue collar contractors embrace the F-150 Lightning. And ultimately, when the Hummer, the lower priced versions of the Hummer EV and the Silverado, which I really didn't answer before when you mentioned it, when that finally gets to market, which is still, not till late of 2023 will we see the Silverado EV.
Right.
I do think these contractors will start to embrace these vehicles.
So Richard, and obviously, so glad to have your perspective and your time and all of the writing that you've done for Automoblog. Let me pick your brain here on just one last thought. In my experience, and maybe you found this too, when you talk to truck owners who have older trucks, so whether it's a Chevy, a Ford, or a Ram, and say they've got something from 2004 or 2005, and they'll say something like, yeah, it has 200,000 miles on it. I've done some regular maintenance, but other than that, it runs like a top. And sometimes I think that type of buyer, they associate, whether it's Chevy, whether it's Ram, whether it's Ford, they associate it with that long-term durability. So you'll hear people say things like, well, Duramax diesel engines run forever, or a Cummins engine runs forever, or a Power Stroke engine runs forever. I think that, and I guess here's what I would like your perspective on. What if EV trucks were the same, so that, maybe 20, 25 years from now, you met somebody that said, I'm running an older electrified Silverado, or I'm running an older electrified F-150 because it's dependable, because I can count on it. I got a lot of miles on it, but I still use it every day. So sometimes I think if they can just get the dependability down with the EVs, they'll be set.
Yeah. Carl, here's what I can say to answer that.
Mm-hmm.
EVs have actually been out there, vehicles, cars, not trucks, going back over 10 years now. The Leaf, I believe the first model year of the Nissan Leaf was 2011.
Yeah.
There's industry experience with hybrids like the Prius, which has been on the market for well over 20 years, which of course has a gasoline engine, but also has a battery. I remember talking to a friend of mine, a general manager at a multi-line car dealership that was not selling Toyotas. And he was very concerned at that time about asking me, taking Priuses in on trade, and asking me, Richard, what about the battery? This battery, I'm hearing stories about the battery lasting only 5 years. I'm hearing stories about the replacement battery is going to cost me $10,000 and so forth. And I think a lot of that has proven to not be the case with both hybrids and the EVs that have been out there. There are certainly some unknowns. Let's also take the broader view, though, and look at the complex electronics that are in all cars today. You buy a high-end internal combustion engine vehicle, especially a European or a high-end Asian car like a Lexus, a Genesis, a Volvo, a BMW, a Mercedes-Benz. The level and the complexity of the electronics in these cars, frankly, scares me a little bit. We joke when I put my collector car hat on that no one's going to, in 25 years, no one's going to be restoring a 2021 BMW 7 Series car. You're going to look at that electronics nightmare and you're going to throw the whole thing away. So getting back to the trucks, it is a big question mark. However, much to my surprise, something that's not talked about enough that I've tried to talk up about with electric vehicles in general is the maintenance and repair savings by getting rid of the engine and getting rid of the transmission. And even for the gentleman, and I'm in this camp, I've owned vehicles that have needed nothing but routine maintenance over the years, but I'm still changing oil and changing spark plugs and doing transmission fluid replacements every 30,000 miles and timing belt every 105,000 miles. All of that is gone with an electric vehicle.
Right.
You're talking about tires. You're talking about brakes, although if you read the most recent Car and Driver long-term 40,000 mile review they did of the Tesla Model 3, after 40,000 miles, they projected that the brake pads would last well over 100,000 miles because of the regenerative braking you get from the EV.
Right.
So it's a question. I don't have all the answers. I do think that there may be a pleasant surprise for the contractors in the long-term view that an EV pickup overall might reduce their expenses, both in gasoline savings by charging the vehicle at home, as well as losing the need to spend any money on routine maintenance repair when we take the gasoline engine components away.
Richard, want to thank you for your time, sharing your thoughts on EV trucks, and of course, continuing to write for Automoblog and be our resident expert on a number of vehicles, including electrified trucks. So such a pleasure to talk to you today, Richard.
Carl, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure to be on the show with you. Thank you.
Richard Reina, Product Training Director at CarID.com and a frequent Automoblog contributor, our resident expert on the classic and collector car market, as well as EV trucks. I'll leave a link below to Richard's free ebook on the collector car hobby. And for more videos like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Reporting in Detroit with Richard Reina, I'm Carl Anthony for Automoblog.